Oh,
Oh,
it started. It just started, I
really?
think.
Like you automatically started it?
It's on a timer and it
Oh, I
starts.
see. I see. Okay.
uh,
Okay. Well, then I will share it to my Facebook page in a way that is more quiet than last time I tried to do this.
Well, hello, Anya. It's so nice to see you. Um, for anyone who hasn't seen Anya and I talking before, we both do some amazing relationship counseling, and we have had the wonderful opportunity to work together before. Actually, working with a couple before, so we have a really great idea of each other's styles and philosophies and perspectives. And we've been doing a couple of series like this on different aspects of being in a relationship and being in quarantine. That's what we're talking about today. Because we're both feeling that amazing little bubble that is both marinating us and cooking us in all the alone time. I mean, the home time that we've been spending lately as couples. Did you get
All
all
right, I
saved?
shared it. I shared it.
Yay!
I'm on.
I just saw that. Okay, great. And are you streaming on Instagram too?
I'm not because yeah, didn't quite know how to get your face on there.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yay. So, so I'm curious, what have you observed? Like, let's start with ourselves
Mhm.
of what we're 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 both we're both part of a couple, and I don't know, it sounds like you've probably been spending a lot of isolated home time with your honey at
Yeah,
home.
yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing with me. So I would love to hear what's been coming up for you. Is this mode any different from normal life for you, or is there something different about this?
I am blessed to work from home with a husband who works from home, so it's not all that different.
Yeah.
Um, and but it is like in some ways because he also I'm used to him traveling like for either a week a month or for like 2 weeks every 2 months and kind of like getting my own little bubble, and then that's like a nice little
Yeah.
yin recharge. So we actually noticed that like at first we just kind of felt stronger and like, yeah, we're on this adventure, this challenge together, and we've got to like dial in the house and foundations and like grow our garden and order all the things. And I'm really grateful, I think, because like Harlan and I have done so much foundational work of like
Yeah.
we are consciously creating our relationship. We're responsible for everything we're experiencing in our relationship.
Yeah.
That it's like, this is why you do that foundational work. Then when things intensify,
Mhm.
you're just ready to meet it.
Yeah. Yeah. You've
Yeah,
built in all the shock absorbers and you know how the vehicle handles around the curves. Like you've
yeah, yeah. And we know each other's strengths. And this is like, this has been wonderful. It's like allowing your partner to be in their strengths
yeah.
and just like not like that's out of my wheelhouse. I'm not even gonna bother. I'm just gonna trust that my partner has got it.
Yeah.
And you know, like vice versa. He knows my strengths and he just like lets me fly with my strengths. And then we're like, oh wow, cool. We're this like great team. We're working in harmony.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so so I want to offer that like from my personal experience on the general, it's pretty harmonious right now. And there's still like ways that we have to adjust. And like just this week, like 2 days ago, we had I was just feeling like I just want more quiet space in my head. It's like because we're always in the house together, and he's like checking in with me. Hey, what about this? What about this? And like I was realizing like because we're not really allowed to go to the beach as much here, so I don't quite get my alone recharge time so
Yeah.
much. So we made this thing. We're like, pretend the other person's not in the house. Let's just like we're not here. Like no, don't talk to me. Let's have our own space. It was awesome.
Oh,
It was,
good.
it was
Good.
awesome. Yeah, because it recharged the polarity, even just like that evening. It was just like, oh, hi, oh, you're here. And then yesterday, it was just, yesterday felt so fresh, like, because 2 days ago we were really giving each other that space. So yesterday, it's just like, oh, I just want to snuggle you. I'm so happy that you're here. I miss you. I want to hang out, and like, and just having deep conversations that are bonding.
Okay, so this is a good first thing to talk about, which it sounds like it differentiated space, getting your own personal space when you're suddenly spending all this time together. And I have a very similar story. We have this guest bedroom that has always just been where we throw the clothes and do the laundry, and the closets are. And, it's a room where we come home and, like, you take off your outside clothes and you put on your sweatpants and your slippers and all that kind of stuff. And I had to make it into an office, where I could close the door and just be alone for a little bit. And that it's amazing what that let settle. Like, there's so many arguments over territory that just stopped happening, because when you're spending so much time in the same space, each person has their opinion of how the space should be, where the things need to be in the space, like how the dishes need to be done, when you just go into your own little zone for a while, it's so, like you said, recharge the polarity. It kind of allows you to come back to that meeting point as a new and different person who's maybe developed a little bit more of a relationship with yourself in that hour or two that you've had alone in your little pod.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I just like go into my office for just that like kind of quiet recharge. It's room of one's own is important. And I'm thinking like, a lot of people are working from home and they don't have like home office setups. They don't have that kind of like room to just like recharge in, or like a guest room to make over. And what comes to mind is like playing pretend, like Harlan and I did a couple days ago with like, you're not really in this house, it's just me, like,
Yeah.
where it's like, like find a room that's like, I need a recharge room. Nobody come in here. Like this is my room for the afternoon, or however long it needs to be. But like ideally with like, a door closed, or like no one accessing, just to have that sovereign mental space.
I was gonna show you my give me 1 second. I'm gonna show you my portable sovereign mental space. 1 second.
Okay. Okay.
Ta-da!
Love it.
These, oh my God, these make being in a tight space together so much easier, because you're just communicating. You're like, I'm in my own world. I can't hear you. You're gonna have to go through some effort to like get my attention, and it's just enough of a barrier that someone's not like, hey babe, hey babe, hey babe, hey babe, hey babe. It's like you can pull one of these, like.
Yeah, no, it totally works. Yeah. I just in a very quiet way I muted it, but I put our little Facebook thing up so that I could see comments this time. So if people have like any questions or anything.
Yeah, I see my friends Alan and Richard are online. Hey Alan, hey Richard. I noticed the first thing, the first week of this was far more interesting than this week has been. I've gotten in my rhythm. Things feel very smooth. But that first week was interesting because you had the stress coming up, which was and Kylie Cole, hi.
Yeah, aloha Kylie. Glad to see you. Hey Eric, quick tech thing. Can you split screen it so that we're both?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Thanks.
Mhm.
That very first week, you had the stress of tactical decision making. Like, what is this? What do we have to do? What do we need to do to get prepared? And I definitely saw coming out of my partner was a little tinge of fear, but definitely that tactical, energetic, like marshaling your forces to go grocery shopping and getting masks and rubber gloves and think through all the things that we have to do to take care of ourselves. And that was kind of neat because it brought in this cooperative problem solving zone. As long as we didn't get too stressed out by it, it was kind of fun to plan for zombie apocalypse together. you know I'd
It's
say
like
that.
we're in this together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Then that makes me think of something that I wanted to bring up today of just like it's like the intensity of the journey. And like
Mhm.
this is a time when like it's intense, it's gonna intensify, any kind of issues that are going on.
Yeah,
And like so that's why it's like so important to, build foundations. This is like a great time to be like, okay, let's shore up our foundation. Because it's kind of like
yeah.
if you got a crack in the foundation, but you're getting all these like slight little earthquakes all of a sudden, you
Thank
can
you.
really
Good word.
see like, oh, okay, that's making everything else shaky. And I was thinking of like a way to think of this.
Yeah,
If someone is feeling like, oh my God, this is squeezing me really hard, and my relationship is feeling a lot of stress, it's like a medicine journey, where you don't have a bad trip if you lean into it.
yeah, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
great way to say it. I like the use of the word seismic is kind of the same metaphor that I have this in my head because it feels like so you think of seismic as two plates pushing against each other, and that pressure from either side causes some kind of dramatic adjustment. But then after that adjustment, those two tectonic plates can kind of settle into their new, more appropriate distance and connection and shape with each other.
Mhm.
And then you have, for me, it's definitely been these outside forces: more time, more stress, and even the pressure of maybe the subconscious pressure of knowing that you need to cooperate and be more integrated. And so everything that's standing in the way of cooperation and integration gets really obvious because as you put, like when you have these little spiky points, as you push together, the spiky points push into each other's soft, tender.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And I definitely had that first week. For me, there was a huge seismic shift around boundary issues. That's one of the things I want to talk about today too, because suddenly, because we're on top of each other all the time, then boundary issues are bound to just explode or be seen or worked through. And I had maybe like a good dramatic you know wrestling with the other person kind of day,
Mhm.
uh and then like sweetness thereafter. Maybe like 2 days of like wrestling, resetting, being clear what you were willing to do and not willing to do, taking stands like this is not okay, like this isn't working, and then after that it was just smooth and lovely, what played out afterwards.
Yeah.
But I felt
Yeah.
that.
It's like, we need to have some kind of boundaries in order to have true intimacy. Like,
Yeah,
otherwise, it's just like you're a blob. It's enmeshment, but it's not intimacy.
yeah, yeah. And if we're going to look into boundaries, some of it is that when you're together a lot more, then there's a lot more of you or your partner trying to adjust each other. There's more of a temptation, like either because your partner's things are in your space, or because your partner's watching the TV that you want to watch, or your partner is doing something that's layering on top of your experience. And because of that, you start to have less control over your independent experience because your partner's actions are more dramatically influencing what's happening just because they're there. their big self is on the couch. They've got the remote control, whatever it is, you know. And and so I guess the first thing is the feelings that arise, because sometimes a boundary issue surfaces as an agitation or a feeling. It's not, you're not really clear why something agitates you. You're just noticing something's rubbing you that hasn't rubbed you before. And the way that kind of surfaces up, and it's just like a felt sense or an itch, or like I don't know why this bugs me yet, but because you haven't really articulated it yet. So I definitely found myself going through a day or two of that, where it's like something bugs me, but I don't know what. And then there's the moment when you finally just blurt it out. You're like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm feeling. Like, this thing bugs me. And you're and sometimes the other person gets super defensive. If you're really skillful at communication, you can always deliver that line in a way that's very objective, or if you've had these kind of communication journeys with your partner before and you've worked out tough issues before, then there's usually like a protocol. There's a well-worn path to having deep conversations. But also sometimes when you're agitated, it just bam comes out like a firework. you know did you have any of those experiences?
Not the fireworks really, but I did. I have had like some moments of being, having like the little things annoy me a little more than usual.
Yeah.
And what I have noticed over the years, it's like whenever I'm in a place, because sometimes there's like a good chunk of time where, oh, don't slip the small stuff. It's fine. Like, oh, he's leaving another wrapper on the counter. Whatever. I'll just that seems to be my thing, is like the little things left on the kitchen counters. But I have noticed a strong correlation with, if I'm getting annoyed at these little things and it's like, oh, another thing he left on the counter, that's indicative that I have not been tending to my own bliss bubble. Like, I have not been meeting my own needs. And it's just very obvious that, like, if I am in a space where I have tended to getting my needs met, where I've taken responsibility for, like, just having enough like sleep and hydration and downtime. For me, it's like downtime, time with nothing on the schedule, time to just like float and be creative and be in nature. When I'm getting that, like the little things are whatever. And it's like, oh, I'm sure like he has to clean up after me too. Like, it's fine, And so I've noticed that, like, okay, if I'm getting there, then I just go to like, okay, this is a stressful time. I've been doing a lot of like, because the first couple of weeks was like a lot of just like researching, like, is my health going to be okay? I have like kind of sensitive lungs. So I'm like really going into like a lot of extra energy. It was like more, I felt like I was just like working more than usual, relaxing less than usual. So it's like, okay, well, this is like a kind of, stressful time, and then the needs are kind of spread thin as far as being met really well. And so I think just acknowledging that is so helpful. Like if I'm like annoyed about some little thing, it's like, oh, clue that this is, just a sign that I'm needing to be more nourished. And when I nourish myself, then my experience with my partner changes.
Yes. So where do you park this bliss bubble? Is it like one of those Glenda the Good Witch bliss bubbles where you can kind of take off with your big ball gown and the
Mm-hmm.
I want a bliss bubble, daddy. So
Create your bliss bubble.
So this is kind of the bliss bubble is this buffered state you get in your emotions and your reactivity when you have been having a good relationship to yourself, actively discovering and meeting your needs, and basically lavishing love butter all over yourself, metaphorically.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's being responsible for the yumminess that I'm feeling here. Like that's my responsibility. And when really getting clean of codependent patterning. And because I think it's like codependent patterning, it's like, I'm not feeling so good. How come you're not cleaning the house as much? How come you're not, I'm not feeling so good. It's you. And it's just, it's like the world changes when we stop making our partner responsible for our happiness. And yes, I think that's like a big one of these like foundational principles.
Yes.
Like you have a really solid foundation if you are actively weeding out the like inclinations to codependency. And I found for myself and a lot of couples that I work with, maybe all the couples that I work with, who am I kidding? Everyone has this. It's like there's a strong pull into the codependency. It's like the weeds will just take over the garden.
Yeah.
Unless you're actively weeding.
Yeah.
And so I think going back to your question on like the bliss bubble, so that's me. The bliss bubble is generated through my responsibility for my own emotions. And like, yeah, he's just like he's not part of this bubble thing that's happening here. It's he's just like another human, another separate being.
Yeah.
And I'm taking care of my own needs. And then I get to bring this like buffered, more like easygoing self into the relationship.
Yeah. Could I break down some terms? Because codependent it's one of those words that I've been hearing since I was a kid. It has meaning, but it's also a big dumb word because it's been used by so many people to describe so many things.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about codependency, could you maybe describe like what is a codependent behavior that you would notice that you're like, oh, that is what I'm. Is there any other words that you would use other than codependent? Like, do you have any other metaphors or?
Yeah, like energetically enmeshed. I tend to think of things in like kind of like spatial relationships and energy movements. So this is almost like when I'm sitting with a couple, I can kind of see it almost.
Me too. Yeah, it's like architecture, some kind of weird like chutes and ladders
Yeah,
game.
where it's like I'm like leaning on you and like you're leaning on me and we're like kind of leaning into each other, and that's how we're holding this structure up. But if one person moves, everything else collapses.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll give an example. Like one of the ways that like one of the weeds that kind of will pop up in my and Harlan's garden is like I have been through my childhood trained into tuning into other people's needs and taking care of them preemptively.
Yes.
And he's been modeled how to kind of be like not like self-responsible or just like kind of like pulling on other people to take care of him. And so we'll, and of course it always takes two. It's like really easy for someone to say, oh, well, he's pulling on me. It's like his fault. But really it's like I've got that thing in me that dances perfectly. Like I know how to do that dance of like, I'm gonna take care of you now and then be resentful later. And so like one of the weeds that we notice is like he'll sometimes just have like some like emotional, just like make some kind of sound or something, and it's like he's feeling frustrated and he's like trying to like bring me in instead of like self-soothing. It's kind of like sending out a little like flag of like, hey, I'm not doing all right. And instead of like communicating so that I can make just like a clear, informed, sovereign decision.
Yeah.
And so at this point, it's just really subtle, and thankfully it hasn't really happened in a while, but it was the one that, like, even when we worked out so many other more intense things, this little subtle thing kept popping up. And so then we're just like, we call it pulling, like he's pulling on me. I'm like, oh, you're pulling on me. Like, oh, I feel pulled. And I'll just say, you know, like, I have to sometimes say out loud, kind of sending that message to my subconscious that has been deeply trained to be out of the picture and just like attending to everyone else's needs. Like, oh, I'm feeling that like pull to take care of you emotionally right now. And so I don't want to just do that unconsciously. I'm just going to keep doing my thing. But like, if you want some facilitation, you know, like you can ask me directly. And so, and then other times he catches himself. He's like, oh, sorry, I was pulling on you. Sorry about that. And it feels so good to clean that up.
Yeah. They brought up so many good things to talk about. To go back to sort of the way I picture codependence is the realm of unconscious agreements. Like in enmeshment, if we're going to break down enmeshment down, it's when you create these hidden contracts with each other, and you can sometimes discover the formula of it by saying, if I do this, then I expect you to do that. You know, and it's like, if I feel bad, I expect you to soothe me. And my unconscious agreement is that I will need you, or I will make you feel this way. And sometimes those things are nice formulas. You know, it's nice when two people bring different strengths, as you said, to the situation. It's like, okay, I'm the nurturer and you're the guardian at the gate, or I'm the fastidious clean one and you're the one that goes out and procures, you know, vegetables and food and cooks, you know, and sometimes those are really lovely cooperative arrangements that you create with your partner. And that's partly why we get into relationships, is to create those things. But then there's the ones that are kind of flung below the radar, and they don't feel like gifts, or they don't necessarily feel like things that we consciously chose. Sometimes it's things that our moms chose. You know, it's like something that our cultures chose. It's something that our 7-year-old chose, and we're playing it out with your partner's 7-year-old that chose the dancing piece, and you haven't really brought it up to the light to actually look at it and be like, what is this weird tangled mess of a garden hose that was running our interactions, you know? And I think that's kind of the realm of codependency, when you feel these kind of strange energetic loops that are taxing. You don't feel like you can actually choose them. They feel pre-chosen somehow, or you notice that they just don't feel good every time they get activated, but you're not able to kind of directly choose why or how you would rather have it flow.
Yeah. I think it's like they feel icky. They're like, there's like a sticky kind of thing when they come up. And so it can feel kind of like icky or sticky. And also you might notice it through like the feeling of rebellion, like get me the fuck out of here. Like that's like one of the feelings that's just indicative, like, oh, the get me the fuck out of here feeling. It's like, it's not about your person, but it's about the codependent dynamic that's like, I think of codependency as like the like wounded patterning that can like weigh down over the lightness that we could be experiencing with like sovereign soul to sovereign soul relationship. It feels really light, but like wounded personality pattern to wounded personality pattern relationship, that's when like it feels really sticky. And so if you're kind of sometimes halfway in the like the light and clear, and sometimes in the sticky, then you're like, okay, the sticky stuff is just our wounded personality patterns enmeshing, doing this enmeshment dance with each other.
Yeah. Maybe another quality of that stickiness is the feeling of have to rather than want to. Like that's kind of the, like when you feel like you're having to do something, sometimes that's when you might be wandering in the realm of codependence a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to use the word sovereign. It's a concept that I really enjoy, the the sovereignty of a spirit, of a human being, and reclaiming that ability to truly express your soul from its its source point, rather than having to flow that energy through all of these labyrinthine structures that are sometimes too cumbersome, and they're they're there for a reason, but they're not the most efficient way to express yourself at some point in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I'm in Greece, and I wouldn't say Greece is, like having lived on the west coast of the United States and in Hawaii, and kind of a certain cultural bubble, sovereignty is a big concept. And then in Greece, it's not such a big concept. It's like everyone lives in villages with like their grandmother on the first floor of the apartment and like their mom above them, and everyone goes back to their village all the time, and all these families that have lived next to each other build their houses next to each other for decades and decades, or generations. And so the concept of codependency is, I mean, of sovereignty, is not the highest cultural value. Like the value of that cohesive community and family connections is actually sometimes a higher value. And so codependency is less on the radar. It's like, well, of course I'm going to make you do this thing. That's what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm just, it's just something I've been aware of, kind of being in a different cultural zone, of
Yeah.
that sovereignty being kind of a, not unique, but it's like a thing that the cultures of that area have valued, and worked to, and found philosophical representations that sort of help attain that. And it's not necessarily what I find in other cultures sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, their balance is more communal rather than like sovereign independent. And it's like this gives us a lot of stability. There are good reasons for
Oh
that.
yeah, there's huge benefits to it, in the sense that you do have these cohesive villages that really do have this amazing cooperative component, and there is a really, there's a stability to the Greek family that I've seen that seems like it's missing somewhat in the American families, because we're so independence minded. There, then freedom gets to expand, but sometimes the connection is what gets caught, is the cost sometimes. But then you also hear everyone complaining about their Greek family, that they're like, oh my God, they're always in my business, they're so nosy. So the loss of independence and sovereignty is very real for some of the people that I've seen. So it's an interesting, I say that because lots of different relationships and cultures will elevate certain values, and that our strategies and the books we read about how to go about relationship will sometimes move us towards different values.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going quite down a rabbit hole, but you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's making me think that, it's like this concept of that kind of sacred union relationship and that like soul to soul. That's like, maybe that's like the best thing you can do with that more like way over on the individualist end of the spectrum. That I love what you were saying about, like there's like I forgot how you put it, but it's like there's like a clear communication of that like soul to soul versus like more like kind of like mucky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, then you have a moment where you, like, when you have that connection with your own inner voice, you have that, this is kind of this is my bread and butter, and what I do with my clients is getting to that soul voice, that, like, what is my spirit telling me all times about this and this and this? Where does my spirit want to place me in my environment? What does my spirit want me to be doing? And when you start to get into a relationship, you often build these agreements with each other. You build these, it's like the vines grow and weave their things together. And so the ability to express yourself like from impulse, from intuition, this is what I want to do right now, then takes on all the consideration of the other person's needs and all the agreements that you have created in the relationship. And so that energy expresses itself, but it's also expressing itself through that whole thicket that's kind of grown around you. And
Mm-hmm.
and it can be beautiful if your partner has that connection to themselves. They have that kind of balance in themselves where they are interested in you having your freedom. They're interested in you having your expression. They support you in that. That's a value they share. And they're actively working through things that get in the way of them not letting you express yourself. Then it's really great because even though you have all these wonderful interactions, there's the flexibility to kind of bend and weave and change form to let you express yourself. But when you have a lot of these kind of codependent, unconscious agreements, it's like the thicket gets kind of confining. All these
Mm-hmm.
vines kind of act to hold and to constrain rather than support and help express.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm so on the same page with you with like that orientation that like there it's possible to have that kind of soul to soul, like we can clear out the thicket, we can clear out the vines, we can be like, okay, instead of unconsciously doing that, like let's go to like what's the core need that wanted to be met through that
Yeah,
entangling, and like let's just
yeah,
speak that out in the open, and
yeah,
then it just clears the space for this very like light and enlivening feeling relationship. I think like when people are operating more from that like clean dynamic of that, it's just like my sovereign soul to your sovereign soul, it feels light and it feels like you get energy from it.
yeah,
It's the opposite of draining. And I think that like this is an opportunity, like I think we put in our banner for the live, like, okay, this weird moment in time is a great opportunity to up level your relationship. And from my perspective, I think it's like you can use this time to take a really deep and meaningful trip instead of a bad trip, like leaning into the intensity and okay, like we're here together so much in this pressure cooker, so we get to really experience and see all of the different cracks in the foundation so that we can lean into working on that, making those unspoken unconscious agreements conscious. Like one of the great ways to neutralize that dynamic is like, what do I actually really need?
yeah.
Like what's the need that I'm trying to meet through this kind of like pulling thing or whatever. Like
I need you to
we don't.
stop bugging me.
But like
That's the
so
behavior.
so much of these dynamics, like they can go back to people being trained as children to not put their needs out in the open.
Yeah,
And like I can't ask directly, so I have to kind of do this like contortion and pulling and like try to pull strings. And it's like we're taught that that's how we get our needs met, especially women, I think. And
yeah,
so um I love the idea of a couple's culture, of like how people talk about like workplace culture. It's a thing. It's like you can't quite like point at it, but you feel it, it when you're in it. And it's because of there's like all these little adjustments and shifts into embracing a certain orientation that people take. And then it's like, oh, I feel really good in this company. This has a really good culture. And we can do that with our couples culture as well. And like approach our relationship in that way of like, what are our foundational values? And like when we put like everyone gets their needs met into that foundation,
yeah,
that's an amazing foundational value for being able to create so much harmony. Like it just like cuts down that like weedy entanglement and make so much space for that soul to soul dynamic.
Well, I'll give you, so let's put this issue through. One of the things that I've been very aware of while doing these live casts is bandwidth. And bandwidth being a finite amount of pipeline to shove all this amazing, wonderful internet goodness through. And I've been wanting to live stream in the evenings, and my partner wants to play video games, like massive Mborg, high bandwidth, like dwarves running around cracking elves on the head with axes. But it's a perfect example of a finite space where you have two needs that are trying to compete for that finite space at the same time. And so when you say everyone gets their needs met, there's some moments where like needs are conflicting, like you getting your need met, maybe I don't get my need met by the very nature of the shared space and the competing resources sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so with that, I would say, like, if you guys are just like out loud embracing this, like, everyone gets their needs met principle, then you approach that differently. You approach that from like a creative place of like, okay, we've got this finite thing with bandwidth. We both want to be doing these fun things. They feel like really fun and nourishing and good to us. And we both really want to do them, but we have this bandwidth. You approach it from like this more resource space than just like, oh my God, I just really want to, and you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah. I think the thing that definitely helps is when you first assume that if a person wants it, it's important to them. It's easy to kind of, it's not, you can be tempted to dismiss the other person's need as less important than your need. But when you really stand it and, okay, you say, why is this important? And you use that moment as a chance to actually associate and become aware of and care about those things that are active in your partner, those things that your partner feels on a day-to-day basis. Those needs are like the unconscious plot point drivers of their life sometimes on a daily basis. And when you can kind of tap into that circuit with them and appreciate its value to them, then even if you can't give them all the bandwidth all the time, you can give them at least your intention and your concern about them getting around to their needs,
Yeah, and like you can give them that loving perspective of like, honey, I really care about what makes you feel fulfilled. And like when we get that kind of sentiment, then we can be it's like that neutralizes the fight, because it's not like I have to fight for my needs getting met. It's like, oh wait, no, my teammate understands what my needs are, and cheers them on, like wants me to have my needs met. And when you have two people where it's like, oh, my teammate he really needs this and he really needs this, and okay, how are we going to work that out? It's like our defenses melt when we feel our partner understanding the core need and where we're coming from with that.
And marshaling their creativity to help us with it. This little stream was actually a very high need thing, because it requires, the TV to be turned down, no live streaming music, no, it's a period of time where all the fun toys have to go off for the hour and a half that I'm doing this. And so it's really a high, it's a big request. It's a big needs request. And so I'll often, come out of the door just acknowledging how appreciative I am, and acknowledging the sacrifice that if my need is taking precedent in this moment, to acknowledge that and show the person how much you really appreciate that they let you have the microphone, they let you have the bandwidth, they let you have the remote control or whatever it is that you're competing for somewhat. And that helps. I noticed that causes a kind of calmness, or like it allows the other person to actually enjoy their gift to you, rather than feeling like giving something up.
Yeah, it's like, rather than like, oh, I had to deprive myself of something in order to just keep love and harmony going. it's like I gave this gift out of love and understanding, and it was appreciated and valued.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that brings to mind one of my favorite relationship hacks, and that is just like asking for appreciation if you're not getting it, just to like preempt any kind of resentment. So it's like in that scenario, if you didn't, go out and appreciate, like obviously like you want to like just appreciate as much as possible. But if you like hadn't done that, or hadn't done that to the extent that your partner wanted, he can just say right out like, this is a big deal for me, and I'm doing it because I love you and I want to be appreciated. And I think with people just like together in their houses a lot more, this is one of the most common things that I see in the couples that I work with, is appreciation deficits.
Mhm.
And this like idea that like he's supposed to read my mind and know that I've been slaving away and need to be appreciated. And so that's codependent patterning. And
Yes.
then like from sovereignty patterning, you go into just saying right out, hey, I would love to be appreciated for this. And
Yeah.
just do it as much as possible. Like Harlan and I will, like every time I clean out the cat box, 'cause I tend to clean out the cat box more than Harlan does.
Yep.
And so I'm just saying like, I'm cleaning the litter box. I clean
Yes.
the litter box. I did a great job keeping the litter box clean. And then he's just like, oh honey, thank you so much. Doing a great job with that. And like, I'm good. Like, it's just like, it's easy. I think about it. I notice it easier than he does. It's just easier for me. So like, fine, I'll take it. There's other things that I slack on that he ends up taking more of the weight for. But like, we can just make this a pleasant experience with like, I just want to be appreciated for that. And so I can ask for it.
You're bringing up one of my favorite topics, which is what I call it's the emotional energetic economy of a relationship. And the person who first put this concept in my head was Sonia Sophia, because she used this term called, I'm getting all my life force credits back. And it really, the idea of a life force credit, meaning just a way to quantify how much emotional life energy things take, whether it's cleaning the cat litter box or doing the chores around the house or dealing with your partner's grumpy nature with your most gracious, like forgiveness in mind, or having to or the cost of being stressed out by your partner's actions and having to kind of compensate and readjust, and that's all an emotional economy. And what you're doing in a way is you're you're advertising to your partner how many life force credits you just spent for the good of the relationship, so that they can take that into account, when they might. And I'll step back. One of the biggest earthquakes that I had 2 weeks ago had to do with this emotional economy, where I'd been doing all of these things to prepare the house, between mopping the floors, cleaning everything, and just like trying to tackle every single task I could. And then my partner would say, "Oh, why is this? Why is the door open?" And to me, I felt like I'd been depositing all this stuff into the emotional energetic economy, and then he comes up and he keeps reading me like there's no money in the bank, like there's no energy in the bank. I'm like, I've been making these deposits all along and I'm still at a zero balance. And that was really deeply upsetting to me. Like, it caused a huge tectonic earthquake fight, which was great. It was good sport. Sometimes those fights are good sport, you know. Um, but it caused me to kind of amplify my communication of what I was offering, like when like, hey, I got groceries, I spent this much, it cost me this much time, it took 3 hours. Just saying that so you'll be aware of it. I did it out of love, but be aware of it. Like, I wouldn't mind some appreciation, or at least I wouldn't mind you taking this into account when you're
Yeah.
figuring out your needs and what you're offering.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love it because it's like so many fights come from that, like feeling like a martyr, feeling like I'm doing more, Like
Yes.
she doesn't really see that I'm doing a little more right now. And
Yeah.
both people are often feeling the same thing. And so, the solution isn't to have like, a victim contest of who's the
Yeah.
biggest martyr, which
Yeah.
is a place that people can go easily. But it's just to be like, hey, I'm just putting this out in the open because it's so normal that like, Harlan doesn't always know everything that I'm doing under the scenes, and I don't know everything he's doing. And oftentimes with like different strengths,
Yeah.
it goes into that kind of stuff. And so it's just great to be, it's just like, I think of the concept of like show your work, like in math,
Yeah. Yeah.
like we can use this with like so much of that like emotional labor economy. I'm not saying like I'm cleaning the cat box to be like, oh, he
Yes.
should do it or he should feel guilty or whatever. I'm just saying it because like I'm showing my work. I'm like, I'm doing a thing for the benefit of the home.
Yeah.
And like it just feels good to have that noted and appreciated, and he'll say things like he's really good at kind of like managing all of our money and our mortgage. And he's like, I talked to the mortgage people and he's like getting our thing like refinanced. He's just like doing all of this stuff that's like
Yeah. That's big
not really.
labor.
What was that?
That's big labor. That's big
Yeah,
labor.
it's a lot of labor to like talk to banks and people. And he's
Yeah.
really good at that. And so he'll just keep me posted on it. Like I had this conversation and with the bank and I, got this info. And so that I can appreciate it because like genuinely fuck, my life is so much better with this teammate that has this strength, and it's like, he'll say the same about me. It's like my life is so much better with this teammate that has these different strengths from me. And instead of having those different strengths be this like silent thing and then you're martyrs, you can have it be just out in the open. Like, this is what I'm doing for the team, for the home. And then just have this like spiral that's going up of appreciation and like, oh wow, you're doing that. That's awesome. And I so appreciate you for that strength.
And I like the economic terms because there's an incredible amount of smartness in a market. We're all questioning our capitalist economics right now, but there is something really powerful in a market with good, clear pricing, because people can make energetic decisions when they understand the price tag. When you see that there's a real bargain deal over here, that's where you flow your money. And when you see this is exorbitantly expensive at some stupid boutique, then you know that 2 days later you can get three for the price of one, then you make a different decision. And the same thing happens in a relationship where as you communicate the energetic offering that you're giving, then you help your partner calibrate to know what you really value, what really does give you life, what really takes life energy. Like what, if I know my partner hates doing the mopping and I'm kind of indifferent, then doing the mopping is like it's a great place to put my energy because I know it saves him 100,000 life force credits. It only costs me 10. It's
Yeah.
like, and that's like that kind of emotional economy as you transmit and you kind of communicate how much energy certain things require and how much energy they give you, then it helps you reorganize, how you collaborate with each other and where you put your energy and what you do ask your partner to do and what you don't ask your partner to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so just to recap, like this is a really good thing for people to like try this at home is just sharing more of these little things out in the open, out on the surface more so that you can calibrate as a team and so that you can invite that flow of appreciation.
But one area I'll go back to this seismic shift because I think it's the thing I kind of wanted to talk about in this, like what this particular situation brought up. And these seismic shifts, like I said, sometimes they're a result of not just being pushed together from outside perspectives, but also a real desire to want to integrate more deeply. Because
Yes.
they're often as we want to get closer, there's usually little pokey things that are the reason we stayed at a certain distance. And then as we notice the desire to move closer, then we actually have to contend with those pokey bits.
Mhm.
And I'm a huge fan of everything. I'm a huge fan of things in the realm of nonviolent communication and being able, and also kind of in that sovereignty conversation, being able to not get so invested in my partner having to change to feel happy.
Mhm.
That's sort of philosophical stand that I've taken in all of my relationships, is first trying to work on my own needs before I'm trying to edit my partner's behavior.
Yeah.
But I do want to place that at one end of the spectrum. That is a realm that people can aim for because there's a lot of benefits, but it's not like a core sovereign, it's not the core truth unto itself, because there are moments when your partner is doing something annoying, you know, and you can like meditate and like transform it in yourself all you want, but especially when they're doing something that actually is fairly antisocial, or is actually costing the relationship a lot of energy because you have to constantly compensate for it, there is a real place for saying like, whack, stop it, please stop this. And those can be sometimes areas that we actually haven't wanted to face, because it does cause very defensive reactions, and we don't want to edit our partner. We don't want to make our partner feel like they're doing something wrong, or and those can be some of the harder areas to get to. But I found that in this time period, because of this compression, but because of this desire to cooperate, it did require those deeper seismic rumbles, and it caused some power plays, because sometimes these things are about power in the relationship, and especially when you're untangling some of these enmeshments, what's the word du jour, the codependencies.
Mhm.
There's a power dynamic in those codependencies that has to be untangled.
Mhm.
Like if a person thinks that they can make you do this, or their behavior will always get a certain result from you, that's that they've wired in the ability to push that button. And when you start to unwire those things, it can be, you're working with the wiring, it's like zap. Oh, you can really zap yourself and try to untangle those things sometimes, because there's a lot of electricity, there's a lot of power wound up in those interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you put it. I think we really see things very similarly, like kind of seeing this like in space, the energetic dynamics
Yeah.
of like sometimes it's like there's a desire, like we're always growing, we're always evolving. So like love always wants to be getting closer and evolving. So it's like there's that desire to come together, but then there's like, oh, those parts that kind of will like once you get close enough, those tectonic plates are gonna start to rub up against each other. And I had a beautiful experience of that kind of around like holidays, New Year's. Harlan and I took a just like deep retreat time, and we had this moment of like, oh, there's like a little thing that was kind of like annoying him, and we had that moment of like that, just like bringing it. There was like space. We cultivated that space to just kind of like bring this up. We kind of basically put ourselves in quarantine for a week where we like didn't go out, didn't
Yeah.
see anyone, we didn't do any like internet and media, and and those times it's like we intentionally did that. We're like, we're gonna turn the heat up and like cook a little bit so that we can
Like
bring
that.
forth the next evolution of like who we are as souls. And it was awesome because it's like him just bringing this like truth that was like just mild under the surface in our like everyday life, but when we quieted everything down, it was just like really noticeable. And that had me just like doing all this shadow work. It's like, oh yeah, I have this pattern that I've been like interacting with you with this, which is like not how I want to be, but it's because of like deep brainwashing from my childhood. And so there's this like wounded little girl that's like running the show in this part of my life. And it was just awesome to just be able to go through that experience with my partner of like, we create this space to just to like facilitate that movement of that, of growing closer. And like inevitably, it's like we can just trust love. Like we can trust that like this love that wants to bring these people together is a good thing. And so when it has us like brushing up with our stuff, with these tectonic plates, it's like, okay, this is a good thing. This is facilitating something. And I reached and I saw something that I'd been peripherally aware of, but not to that level. And it was just like an amazing breakthrough that I had because of just this like gentle kind of relationship deepening that like impacted all sorts of like health and vitality aspects of my life. And I just love that there's that potential in relationships, that when we cultivate that kind of space to be like, let's be in this soul to soul relationship,
Yeah.
and let's keep growing together, and let's trust love, that it's like that those little moments of that tectonic plates like crashing into each other are amazing gifts. I was like, I would have paid thousands of dollars for that in like a retreat or a medicine journey or some shamanic ceremony to get the level of insight that I got.
Yeah. Amen. This is maybe off topic, but I'm noticing I've been trained to work with couples through different dialogue techniques and trying to peacefully negotiate out and explore each other's realities and maps of reality, and 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 that's when the two of you can kind of come together as an adults with fully operational brains, fully seated in your humanity. And sometimes you're not always dealing with the adult human, in your partner. Sometimes you're dealing with the hurt little girl. You're dealing with some wild cornered mammal, you know, or you're dealing with a, a an aspect of the personality that is trying to create safety through dominance or through asserting authority or through playing the victim, or and I would say 85% of the best tools are usually through this kind of dialogue and through touch, those two together, being safely connected to each other, really exploring each other's worldviews through reflective listening, exploring needs, feelings, and that's some of the best tools. And then sometimes there are these out of bound circumstances where the tools uh, are really more like wrestling a character inside your partner to the ground, or grappling with them in a different kind of way. I found that sometimes in these big seismic shifts, these are the things that we weren't able to handle through sweet dialogue. These are these almost these things that the monkeys inside of us have to kind of uh, things like I think territory is one of those monkey brain kind of things sometimes. Like it's a part of our mind that goes back millions of years, and it's the survival instincts, and it's still playing itself out inside the cozy apartment or living room of your house. But it's like the monkeys in the room, and sometimes the action, the healing action is more to have a conversation with your partner's animal brain, if that makes sense.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't had that particular experience, but I can totally, yeah, I can totally imagine it. For
Uh,
for,
I'll give you an
for
example. I've had couples sessions where and been in these situations myself where my partner is really activated and can't quite hear me, or the the partner is very activated and the dialogue is failing. It's like you try to come back to okay, well, this is what I hear you say, and it's not working. And sometimes what the level matching is actually a person's kind of animal brain has them puffed up and kind of being more aggressive, or and it can be aggressive through language. I mean, I've seen a couple where the wife, everything out of her mouth was a yell. Like everything out of her mouth was already a volume 10. And there was no volume 3 that could get through to her when she was at volume 10. She was at volume 10 person, to assert a kind of dominance and authority over the space, because you couldn't cut through. And the only way you get her attention was actually bringing yourself up to a level 10 or an 11 until she was shocked. And it interrupted her pattern enough to actually allow her to be open to a 5, level 5, and then talk down to 3. But that's kind of one of those creative things. It's like this is, you have to deal with this person at the more, can I growl louder in the forest, until a person can kind of hop back into the more human faculties and have a dialogue. This is a little bit of a side thing, but it came up in my experience where it's like, oh, like I'm gonna play act. I'm gonna let my animal come out of me and play act for a day and just be the monkey taking up space. And then once that level of our interaction has worked itself out, we'll come back to the super logical, dialogue-based interaction again. And that's what
No,
I
I get
expect.
it. Yeah. And it just makes me think of like, it's very similar to the orientation I have of just like bringing your full brain along
Yeah.
into the relationship, because I think like the perspective that I take, that I work with more frequently, like in my own relationship and with the couples I work with, is just like working with trauma, working with like unconscious trauma and the wounded inner children, because we play out so much unconscious trauma in
Oh
our
yeah.
primary relationship. And so it's like very frequently, especially in those seismic shift kind of moments, the solution is not going to come through any kind of conscious adult dialogue. And there's actually this technique that Harlan and I teach couples. Well, when we did a workshop together, and then otherwise I bring it into my private practice with couples of, it's a little too complicated to go into right now, but in the gist of it is like it's a synthesis of method acting with like things I've learned from NLP to talk to exactly that part that's activated. And so it's like this way of like reaching that inner child, and like when someone's in that space, like creating enough safety so that they can like hang out in that inner child space. And this is what I did when I had that giant breakthrough around New Year's, with like Harlan kind of like pushing this button in me that like had me see this like unconscious aspect that was running the show. And it's like the solution comes through just fully diving into that part of your brain that's activated, like speaking from the amygdala, speaking from the first person place of that wounded child, and then having your partner showing up with the new information, like the data from real life. Because so many times it's like we're in these sticky situations because there's old trauma, and then we're projecting that out, and we're recruiting our partner to play a certain role. And then they have that part in them that's like, yes, I'll play that role because that's similar to my trauma. So I've seen like miraculous changes happen for people, experience miraculous changes myself with working with like, okay, like let's just like give a lot of love and space for that one part to unwind and show up, and then like give it the actual like real life data, like, okay, in this moment, I'm your husband from the future, I'm your boyfriend from the future, and this is the real truth. It's like when someone's nervous system can have that moment of taking in, like when they can be in those same neural networks, those same neural pathways that are creating the trigger and projection, and when they can feel safe enough to see like, oh, this this is actually different.
Mhm.
There's some different loving information coming in.
Yeah.
Like I'm having that wounded part feel held and seen and supported. Oh my God. I mean, it's just like you neutralized it. That same trigger, that same pattern is not there because that same identity has shifted. Like, you're no longer someone who goes through the world with that filter or like looks at your partner through that filter.
Yeah. And sometimes the medicine is sweetness, sometimes it's creating safety, sometimes it's tenderness. Sometimes when you're accessing your partner's inner teenager, sometimes that's limits or clarity or, being assertive, and not, sometimes the inner teenager uh, just runs, like when there's no authority in place, it needs that boundary, it needs that container sometimes because it's learning a lesson about power, it's learning a lesson about expression, and it's, so sometimes the medicine is all kinds of different medicines. You really have to feel into it in the situation. It's like it's not one set prescription for everything. It's like what does this developmental part of my partner need? What's it seeking? What was the developmental lesson that maybe got delayed until this moment? you know
Yeah. And so like the hack that I'm feeling there with that is like we don't have to relate to everything our partner does or gives us at face value. It's like to be that most optimal team. It's like, oh, this is not my teammates' deepest soul truth that they're like putting out at me right now. This is my teammates like inner pissed off teenager. So I don't have to,
Yeah.
relate to this at full face value and take it personally and stuff. Just like
Right.
have some space for them to have that moment, and then be able to have that generosity because it's going to go both ways too.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've covered a lot of territory. Is there anything else that you would cover in this subject area?
Sure. I have one more thing.
Okay.
As far as just like a really good relationship hack to put into practice to be able to survive quarantine. Um,
Relationship hack. You could you could take the woman out of San Francisco, but you can't. Don't hack into my relationship. When you say a hack, you mean like uh a thing that
it,
like
it's a quick way to activate that kind of culture shift. So
mm,
I am using language that I imagine people are attracted to because it's like, oh, I can do this little thing. So
oh
I'm trying
yeah.
to, communicate like this is easy, you can do it. So simple. And it's like the principle that's coming from is like we can create a couple's culture that is super harmonious and yummy. And sometimes, it's like, well, how do I put that principle into practice? Okay, here's like a little hack.
So it's like a
So
shortcut. It's like a thing that accelerates you and it's easy.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so this one is just this concept of capacity and
Okay.
like sharing like how high or low capacity you are. Because, most of the time, the fights that don't really need to happen, that aren't like any beautiful big revelation coming through, they're just a waste of time and energy. Those fights happen when people are at low capacity.
Yeah.
And so I just love this. Harlan and I do this all the time where like we'll just share like I'm pretty low capacity right now. And sometimes it's just like it's not like a fight or anything, but it's like, it wants to have a deep conversation about like, hey, what's our plan with like this house renovation or something like that? Or like, did you get back to like this guy? What are we going to tell this floor guy or something? And it's like, it's going to turn into a fight. It's going to turn into some like prickly thing if
Yeah.
we go into it. So just like, I'm low capacity right now, or usually that phrase is heard in my house in the evening when we're both tired and when we're both cleaning the kitchen, and we're cleaning the
Right.
kitchen in our own ways. And
Right.
so, sometimes they're just a little kind of like grumpy, prickly people pushing up against each other. And it's like, this is not the time for deep connection. Don't expect that out of yourselves. And like just saying like, I'm low capacity right now. Like, please, like, don't talk. I can't even process what you're saying, but I love you.
Yeah, I love that. And the inverse of that is being aware of how much emotional energy, like life energy, it's going to take for a certain subject, and getting your partners, getting them to enroll in the conversation. Being like, hey, I want to talk about this. Do you have capacity for it? Or we should probably talk about this. This is a good time. You want to talk about it in the next few days? And because there's just some conversations, it takes a little bit of speed and momentum and good peaceful rest to have the resource to get through, because some of those conversations are like crossing the desert. You got to get across it, but you need enough gas and fuel and sleep and cuddle time to make that full
Yeah.
transit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like not a good idea to push it late at night. Like, oh, I'm really upset. We need to talk about this thing right now. I need to like figure this out before we go to sleep. Like, you're
Yeah.
not going to figure it out before you go to sleep if your partner is just like doesn't have the capacity. So just respect respect where they're at, and like let yourself like hold it. Like, okay, I'm just gonna like just like hold myself with this tension. And you guys can say like, I love you, we'll talk about this tomorrow, we'll go into it. Like, you can love each other and just respect the amount of capacity that you're operating with.
Yes, love it. Well, this is good. Some good topics. This is, I am noticing that I'm about to go plug myself in and recharge for the night. It's about 11:30 here, so does this feel like a good place to? Oh, I know. One last question. Okay, so based on the topic, what would be, if you're making a relationship a project? A lot of people are cleaning out their houses in this time. A lot of people are like doing the home repairs they never had time to do. What are the relationship repairs? Real quick, like bullet points. What are some of those tasks, those maintenance tasks on the relationship that this is a good time to go and do? That you wouldn't normally have the time to do.
Oh, good one. Good one. Okay, so one of my favorites, and I'll see if I can maybe even pull this up on my phone to give people an example, because I took a picture of it recently with a couple a few weeks ago, but it's like getting a big piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And so this is like helping orient you energetically towards that really healthy foundation. It's like a big piece of paper, and like writing down, like, what are your values? What are your commitments?
Yeah.
Usually when I do this with couples, they've been in a sticky situation. So there's also included like, and like, these are the changes that I'm committing to. These are the new behaviors that I'm committing to. And so like some of this is like behaviors that it's like going on a diet, or doing like a workout regimen, or any kind of like creating new habits. It's really helpful to like put it out. And so I have like poster board and like colored pens, and we're just writing like, in the middle, it's like, these are the values. These are our core values as a team, which that's just like really great for your brain to be able to kind of like take that in.
Yeah, you need to have that map. I mean, like if you don't, like when you have a map and you're exploring the neighborhood, you can place things on the map. Like you're like, oh, this situation is totally relevant to you identifying this as being one of your main values.
Yeah.
You plug it in, you draw associations.
Yeah. So let me see. I'm just pulling up a see, here's a picture of like a client's. Oh shoot. Give me a moment. Um, it won't pull up.
Okay. Well, you can always post it in the
Yeah, I
comments.
can always post it. But it's like you just want to write that out so that when you're like changing the direction of a giant ocean liner, you know, it takes a lot of energy to change these unconscious habits. And so we've been talking about like going from that kind of like unconscious enmeshment, entanglement vibe into more conscious out loud creation of the relationship. And so
Yeah.
having like a piece of paper being like, okay, we have all this time together, let's like sit down and actually write like what are our core values and what are the behaviors that we can put into place to that are aligned with those core values that support us experiencing those core values.
I love that. I'm such a visual learner. You know, it helps me. You know, like a dialogue is like a stream of information, but when you can actually draw it out on a map, then suddenly you can think of things more dimensionally. You can actually see, you can see value topography. You can see like how important this thing is in relationship to another thing. And when you see them all on the same sheet of paper, you sort of see what's the most important, how they interrelate, and it just lets your brain process it in a whole different way.
Totally,
I'm a
totally.
fan of those art pads, those big art pads with big magic markers. I have another one, which is kind of what I was talking about with the emotional economy. And I find that this is a very helpful map for couples to draw when they're having arguments over things like dishes and cleaning the house. And, you know, when I hate it when you do that, or when you do this, it bugs me. And to actually draw out the emotional economy and to create some arbitrary life force credits value to things. And you might say, you have each person has a side of the paper, and on each person's side, it's the things that give them life and the things that require life energy from them. So,
Ah,
for instance, you could say, every time I come home and the dishes are put away and the house is clean, it's like 150 life force credits. And every time you second guess me, it's like negative 300 life force credits, you know. And so you understand, it's helpful to take on a commitment that you're going to uh, disable as many of the triggers as possible in your life. You know, that's the underground commitment. But it's also good if your partner realizes what just costs you energy to deal with. And I think this is really important because sometimes we don't want to tell our partner what annoys us, but sometimes it's a really useful map for them to see the things that they do that probably are requiring excess energy from everyone in their life. You know, um, I call it the antisocial behaviors, but the things that just are expensive to deal with in a person's interaction with someone. So when they can kind of see your inner economy, like, oh, these are the things that recharge you, and these are okay, wow, maybe I never realized how expensive this one thing I do is for you. Like, let me work on that first. Like, if I'm not going to do one thing, I'll not do that thing, you know. And it's very helpful sometimes, because when all needs just sound the same, it just sounds like a never ending list of needs. But when you can kind of see which ones are the really important ones, it gives you uh, it allows you to organize and set priorities somewhat in how you're working on yourself.
yeah, yeah. And I would add that, like, you know, like that kind of exercise really helps orient into like that team. Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's be a winning team. I'm gonna play in ways that support my teammate
Yeah.
playing at his or her highest capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I would also add like that self-responsibility piece, like to also write like what are ways that I, you know, deposit into my own bank account so that I could be
Yes.
taking responsibility for making sure that
Yeah.
I'm taking care of myself as a teammate.
That's key, and I feel like people need to tackle that first. Sometimes that thing is a real game changer, because when you learn how to take care of your needs, and you really do the inner work of not requiring everyone else to constantly adjust themselves, then you actually get real sovereignty over how your day goes. You know, what you get a lot more influence on what your usual mood level is at. But
Wow.
that being said, you know, sometimes that the reason we're in relationships is to see ourselves through the reflection of someone else. And that means it's required to get real honest about how you feel about someone's behavior sometimes, while healthily trying to be aware of taking care of your own side of that, you know, taking care of your own needs as much as possible. But it's a balance, you know, it's a balance. Either end is sometimes too much. I like couples who never tell each other what the other person finds annoying. Then sometimes the relationship ends and the person doesn't have any clue why. You know, they're like, why? I would have worked on it had I known what was actually bugging you. And I've seen couples like that, you know, who have the kind of who really value things like law of attraction and energy, that they go so far in that vibe direction that they sometimes don't tell each other what's bugging them. You know, they deny their partner the chance to learn from the reflection of each other. And then the other end of that is that you're constantly making your partner responsible for your mood, which is just ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, now I'm going to plug myself in. Too
Mhm.
bad. Ania, it's been such a pleasure um, connecting to you in Maui, and and I really enjoy these conversations. It brings so much out, you know, getting to riff.
Totally. Yeah. Ditto. Love chatting with you.
All right, is that I'm going to end the
Hmm.
live. Okay, I'm going to hit the end button. Stay on.